She had been on that sidewalk for 3 hours, and the cup in front of her had 63 cents in it. The E string was gone. The B string was gone. What was left was a melody with holes in it, like a sentence missing half its words. But her fingers knew where to go anyway, pressing down on three strings, coaxing something recognizable out of a guitar that had no business still being played. The song was Ben. She played it the way people hum in empty rooms. Not for anyone, not for the 63 cents, just because it was the thing her hands knew how to do. Nobody stopped. A man in a gray suit walked past and his shoe clipped the edge of her guitar case. He didn't slow down. A woman with a stroller crossed to the other side of the street before she reached the corner where the girl was sitting. A teenager threw a quarter in the general direction of the cup and kept moving, eyes already past her before the coin landed. That was how it worked. You learned it fast. A pair of shoes stopping in front of you didn't mean anything until they'd been still for more than a few seconds. It was November 1983. Thriller had been selling 40,000 copies a day for a year. Michael Jackson's face was on every magazine cover, in every store window, on every television set in the country. He was 25 years old and the most recognized person on earth. He was also walking down Ventura Boulevard in Encino at 3 in the afternoon, heading back to his car after a recording session that had ended badly. Not in a fight, just in that flat, airless way where everyone in the room knows nothing good is coming out of the next hour and nobody says it out loud. The engineer had said, "Let's pick this up tomorrow," and tomorrow meant the same walls and the same stuck feeling, and Michael had nodded and walked out and kept walking past the parking lot. He needed to walk. He did that sometimes, just walked, because the house had too many rooms and all of them were quiet in the wrong way. He heard the song before he saw her. Not the melody exactly. What he heard was the absence inside it, the notes that weren't there. Two strings missing, the lower register gone, and she was compensating with her right hand in a way that almost worked, which meant she had been playing long enough to problem solve. He knew that trick. He had used it himself years ago on a guitar that wasn't much better than hers. He stopped walking. She was sitting against the wall of a laundromat, knees up, the guitar balanced across her legs. Maybe 11 years old, maybe 12. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band, one side of it coming loose. Her shoes were too big, the kind that come from a donation box, laces doubled up so they wouldn't drag. Her fingertips had the flattened, calloused look of someone who had been pressing down on steel strings for years, which meant she had started young, which meant someone had taught her. He stood on the sidewalk and did not move for almost 30 seconds. He had written Ben in 1972. He was 13. He recorded it in one take because the second take felt like performing it, and performing it would have made it smaller. The song was about a rat, technically. That was never what it was about. He had stood in the booth and closed his eyes and sung it to the walls, and the walls had not answered. And that was fine because that was the point. Alone is alone, whether you name it or not. He started walking toward her. She didn't look up. 3 hours had trained her not to expect anything from footsteps. When he crouched down in front of her, not standing, crouching, getting low enough to be at eye level, she finally raised her head. She looked at his face the way you look at something your brain isn't quite reading yet. Then it did. Her fingers went still on the strings. "Keep playing," Michael said. His voice was quiet, not careful, just quiet. "You were getting somewhere on the bridge." She stared at him. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. "The chord changed before the last verse," he said. "You were almost there." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You're..." "Yeah." He sat down, not crouching. Sat down on the sidewalk, back against the laundromat wall, the red jacket against the dirty concrete. He didn't adjust anything or look around first. He just sat. "What's your name?" It took her a second. "Danielle." "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 7. "Who taught you?" She said it quickly, the way you answer a question you've already decided not to think about. "My dad." Michael didn't follow that. He looked at the guitar instead, the crack along the body, the two missing strings, the tuning pegs worn smooth from being turned too many times. He recognized that guitar. Not that specific one, the kind of guitar you keep playing after it's broken because stopping isn't something you know how to do. "Can I hear the whole song?" he asked. Danielle looked at him for a long moment, deciding something. Then she started from the beginning. It was rough. The missing strings pulled the whole thing off balance, and she was fighting it with every chord change, her hand tensing at the knuckle in a way that cost her. But the phrasing was right. She wasn't decorating the song or showing anything off. She was just playing it, which is harder than it sounds, and you can't fake it. Michael watched her hands. When she finished, he said, "Do you know who wrote that song?" "No." "I did." He said it simply, no setup. "I recorded it when I was 13. We did it in one take because I knew if we did it again, I'd start thinking about how it sounded instead of just saying what I was saying." He paused. "It's not really about a rat." Danielle almost smiled. "I know. What do you think it's about?" She thought about it for a second. "Not wanting to be the only one." He looked at her. "Yeah," he said, "that's it." A woman across the street had stopped. She was holding a dry cleaning bag and standing very still, staring at the sidewalk. She had recognized him. Two men further down had stopped walking and were watching without moving closer. A teenager on a bike coasted to a stop at the curb, put one foot down, and didn't get off. The number grew slowly, the way it does when everyone can feel that something fragile is happening and nobody wants to be the one to break it. Nobody reached for a camera. Nobody said his name out loud. They just stood there, holding their breath, watching a man in a red jacket sit on a dirty sidewalk and teach a girl how to hold a cord. Nobody came closer. Michael reached over and touched Danielle's left hand on the neck of the guitar. "Your ring finger's doing too much work," he said. "Let the middle finger carry the chord on the G string. Move the ring finger back just a little." He adjusted her hand, half a centimeter. She played the chord. The difference was immediate, cleaner, less fighting. She played it again and then again. And by the third time, her hand had figured out it didn't have to work as hard. "Oh," she said quietly. "Your instinct is right," Michael said. "Your hand is just fighting itself." She played through the verse. It was better in a way she could hear herself, which is the only kind of better that actually teaches you anything. Across the street, more people had stopped. Nobody was speaking. Nobody reached for a camera. They stood there and watched in the specific silence that happens when people understand they're looking at something they won't be able to explain properly later. "How long have you been out here?" Michael asked. Danielle shrugged. It wasn't an answer. It was the gesture of someone who has stopped expecting the question to go anywhere useful. "My dad left 8 months ago," she said after a while. Not because he asked, just because the question had opened something. "He just didn't come back one day. My mom works 2 jobs, but she had to put me at my grandmother's, and my grandmother got sick in September." She said it without any particular emotion, the way you recite facts you've already processed past the feeling part. "I don't really have a place right now." Michael didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at the worn tuning peg on the third string. "When I was on the road at 10 years old," he said, "I used to cry in the back of the van at night and make sure nobody heard me. Because the rule was, you don't show it. You keep going, you perform, you smile." He stopped. "Nobody told me that rule was wrong. I just figured it out a lot later." "Was it wrong?" Danielle asked. "I think someone should have known," he said. "That's all. Someone should have known." She looked at him. Her jaw was tight in the way that means someone is deciding whether to cry and deciding not to. Michael stood up. He reached into his jacket and took out a folded amount of cash and placed it in her guitar case without counting it out in front of her. Then he pulled out his phone book, a small worn one he kept in his inside pocket, and found a name and wrote a number on the corner of a page, tore it out cleanly, and handed it to her. "Her name is Sandra," he said. "She works with kids in exactly your situation. Tell her Michael called ahead." He said it plainly, not as a speech, not wrapped in anything larger than what it was. He stood there for a moment. He was wearing one glove. He wore it as a habit by then, a plain white cotton glove on his left hand. Nothing like the rhinestone stage version. Just cotton, worn at the thumb joint, a small pen ink mark near the wrist. He looked at it for a second, then pulled it off. He placed it in Danielle's hand. "So you remember that somebody stopped," he said. She looked at it, then at him. She opened her mouth and nothing came out, and he nodded once, like that was a complete answer. He walked to his car. The people gathered on the sidewalk parted without being asked to. Nobody reached out. Nobody said his name. They just watched him pass and then stood there looking at the girl still sitting against the laundromat wall, holding a worn white glove and a broken guitar. Michael called Sandra from the payphone on the corner before he got in the car. Sandra picked Danielle up that evening. Her mother was located by the end of the week. It took 2 months of back and forth, a temporary placement, 3 meetings with a caseworker, and 1 very long phone call between Sandra and Danielle's mother, but by January they were in the same apartment again. Danielle kept playing. She learned to restring a guitar herself. She learned to read chord charts. She worked at a music store at 16, and the owner let her practice in the back room after closing on nights when nobody else was around. She is a music teacher now at a middle school in the Valley where she has taught for 21 years. Every year in the first week of school, she plays Ben for her students on a guitar with a deliberately loose string, 1 chord always slightly out of tune. She wants them to hear what a song sounds like when it's still working itself out. She keeps the glove in a small wooden box on the shelf above her desk. The cotton has yellowed at the edges. The ink mark near the wrist has faded to almost nothing. She has never had it framed or displayed. It stays in the box, in the dark, which feels right to her. Some things lose their meaning the moment you put them on a wall. She doesn't tell the students whose it is. She just tells them that someone stopped for her once when most people didn't, and that it changed what she thought was possible. Not because of who he was, because he sat down on the sidewalk and stayed long enough for it to mean something. In November 1983, Michael Jackson sat beside a girl playing a broken guitar, and he didn't move for the better part of an hour. That's the whole story. Most of the ones that matter are that simple.